This is where projects come to life. Our showrooms are designed to inspire with the latest products from top brands, curated in an inviting, hands-on environment, and a team of industry experts to support your project. We'll be there to make sure everything goes as planned, from product selection to delivery coordination. At Ferguson Bath, Kitchen and Lighting Gallery, your project is our priority.
Find great brands like Bosch at your local showroom or visit us online at ferguson.com/build.
Hey, it's Will Friedle.
And Sabrina Bryan.
And we're the hosts of the new podcast, Magical Rewind.
You may know us from some of your favorite childhood TV movies like My Date with the President's Daughter.
And the Cheetah Girls movies.
Together, we're sitting down to watch all the movies you grew up with and chat with some of your favorite stars and crew that made these iconic movies happen.
So kick back, grab your popcorn, and join us. Listen to Magical Rewind on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Brought to you by State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Welcome to another episode of Her Playbook. My name is Madeline Burke, and joining me on this episode is the very first female CEO in the NFL, former Raiders CEO. She's an analyst, an author, and a lawyer, and fondly known as the Princess of Darkness. Amy Trask, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Well, I am honored to join you. It is a pleasure to join you. That was a lovely, lovely, very generous introduction. The most important part of which, of course, was the best nickname ever in the world, Princess of Darkness.
It is kind of an epic nickname. Who first bestowed that on you? Where did that come from?
Well, it was not bestowed upon me as a compliment. To the contrary. And the way I learned about it was Mike Silver, who most who follow football know of Mike. He was at the time with Sports Illustrated, and he wrote a profile about me in which he quoted anonymous sources. He identified them all as league executives, team executives, anonymous. And I keep saying anonymous because the point is, this was not intended as a compliment. They said, behind her back, we refer to her as the Princess of Darkness. They didn't want to put their names with it. And it clearly wasn't intended as a compliment, but I embraced it. I thought, that's a pretty neato nickname.
Yeah.
I embraced it. Raider fans embraced it. We love it. I will forever cherish Princess of Darkness. So to those anonymous sources, thank you. And to Mike Silver for reporting that, thank you.
I kind of love that, though. I mean, that's how it goes, right? You know, you rebrand the negative, make it into a positive, and it's really, Raider Nation leaning into it is an incredible aspect of that as well. It's a great nickname.
And by the way, that was the best part. The story is written. I read it. I think, that's kind of a neat nickname. I know it wasn't intended in a complimentary manner, but I kind of like it. And then I learned that Raider fans loved it as much as I did, and we embraced it together. And the fact that they embraced it, or as you said, leaned into it, meant the world, and we've loved it since then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you've had quite the journey in the NFL. I want to start, though, at the very beginning. You grew up in Los Angeles. Where did your love of football originate?
I fell in love with the game when I was in junior high. Now,
Okay.
Back in the day when I went to junior high, and I recognize it's not this way anyway, all over. I don't know if it's not this way anywhere, but certainly where I grew up, it is no longer this way. The junior high begins in 7th grade. But when I went to junior high, that's when junior high started. And in 7th grade, I attended my first football game in person, our junior high versus another junior high. And I just fell in love with the game. Yes, it's a game of power and speed, but it's a very cerebral game. There's just a tremendous intellectual component to football. It's a game of matchups. How can your defensive backs cover our receivers? Can our pass protection thwart your pass rush? And so on and so forth. So I fell in love with the game in the 7th grade.
That's amazing. And it's, so many people watch it and think of it as, on the surface, you see one thing, but when you study the game, it is kind of like a game of chess. There's so much going on that when you slow it down and watch every little detail, it is incredible. At what point did you say, okay, I want to really dive in and learn this game?
Well, I love that you use the expression game of chess, because that's an expression I use as well to describe the game. It's a game of chess where the chess pieces are very fast, very strong, very powerful, but it is an intellectual game of chess. And I started following the game at that point went to football games throughout my junior high and high school years. And then when I went to college, I was at Cal Berkeley. And at the time, the Raiders were still in Oakland. Al had not yet moved the team to Los Angeles. And I fell in love with everything about the Raiders and really started, I think, I had learned about the game and I'd learned elements of the game before then, but really dove into it when I was in college in terms of learning about strategy and things like that.
Well, and it's so unique too. You go to college at Berkeley, the Raiders are just down the street. You get to fall in love with that team. You move back to Los Angeles. The Raiders are kind of in that same, they're following you that this way, it seems like. But when you start there, when you get that internship with the Raiders, how did that come about? How did you pursue that? Or how did you decide this is the direction I want to take my career?
I was never one to have a plan. I never had a strategy or a plan about my career. I still don't. I remember at one point during my years with the Raiders, someone said to me, you got to have a 5-year plan. And I looked at this person for whom I had and still have a tremendous amount of respect and said, yeah, no, I don't want a 5-year plan. I don't need a 5-year plan. I don't like 5-year plans. And by the way, that whole 5-year plan thing didn't work out so well for Russia.
Yeah.
But, so I've never had a plan. But what I did was I was in grad school and I heard other people a year or so ahead of me talking about internships and externships. And I'd never heard the word externship before. But the whole thing sounded very intriguing. So I cold called the Raiders and said, I'd like to be an intern.
That's incredible. Because you were going to school for law. And when you initially decided to say, okay, I want to study law, that's a big task to take on. Did you know that you wanted to go into law in this way? Or was it, something that seemed like a responsible path? What was your initial plan when you said that's the studying path I'm going to take?
Well, I went to law school with the express intent that I would never practice law. In other words, I went to law school for the education. I thought that going to law school would be beneficial to me in a business career, and it was, and it is. I was, a lot of people go to law school never intending to practice law or not knowing if they'd practice law. Well, I went with the express intent that I was not going to practice law and that I would certainly never, ever, ever be a trial lawyer. But I went for the education, and it was a terrific education. The other reason I went was, this was a very, very long time ago. I joined the Raiders as an intern in the early part of the 80s and then full-time in the mid 80s. The whole discussion about women in sports, women in business that we're having today, that wasn't even on the radar screen back then. And I thought that irrespective of what business I wanted to go into, having that law degree might give me a little bit of extra gravitas. Were I in a business where I'm the only woman, I'd have that law degree. And I think to some extent it did help for that reason.
Did you kind of have a knowing from an early age that you were going to be, a groundbreaker in that sense?
Oh, no. I had no knowing from an early age of anything. I was one of those kids that wanted to be, every year, every few months, I wanted to be something different. I was encouraged by my parents to dream and to pursue my dreams, and that it was okay when you're growing up to change your dreams all the time. And I really think that's good for kids. Why pigeonhole someone at a very, very young age and say, well, aha, you said you wanted to do X. Well, you know what? You're a kid. Change your mind umpteen times. That's what I did.
Who doesn't love the good things in life? Even though I enjoy a little luxury, it doesn't mean I can always afford it. Until I discovered Quince. Quince is my go-to for luxury essentials at affordable prices.
Quince offers a range of high-quality items at prices within reach, like 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50, washable silk tops and dresses, organic cotton sweaters, and 14-karat gold jewelry.
And Quince only works with factories that use safe and responsible manufacturing practices. How great is that?
I love my silk slip dress from Quince. It is comfy, chic, and amazing quality.
I can't recommend their super soft fleece joggers enough. They feel like butter.
Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/Teddy for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Teddy to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Teddy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you go from intern to CEO at the Raiders organization. That's an incredible path. But first, I want to start with, your first impressions. You've fallen in love with this organization from the outside. You join the organization with this internship from the inside. This is, Super Bowl Raiders, Marcus Allen. What was this energy like around that organization that made you feel like, okay, this is a place that feels like home?
Well, it was the team, the NFL team with which I fell in love while I was at Cal Berkeley. And, people use the expression all the time, "Oh, it's just down the street." Well, really, the Raiders were just down the road from where I was. And I fell in love with everything about the team. Uh, here was a team owner who would hire people that other teams had labeled behavior problems, or that the media or fans had said were behavior problems. He didn't care. He would give people second chances and third chances and more chances than many people thought he should give people. Well, you know what? As the kid who was labeled a behavior problem in kindergarten, and that label stuck with me through high school, some people would argue it's still an appropriate label, and they're probably right. But I was given second chances and third chances and more chances. And again, I was labeled a behavior problem. So all of that resonated with me. You'd watch NFL games and the visiting team would pull up to the stadium and the guys would get off the team bus and they'd be wearing sports coats and carrying briefcases. And then the Raider team bus would pull up and the men would just tumble out looking, I guess, like that expression, the cat dragged in the night before. And I love that. And I love that the owner gave people second and third chances and didn't care if you were a behavior problem as long as you performed. All of that resonated with me. And yes, you're right. I joined at a time that was very exciting for the team. But all of that combined was part of what I loved about the organization.
What were your early interactions like with Al Davis? And, obviously we know how close you guys grew as your career progressed, but, when you started with this organization, how did you earn his trust?
Well, one of my first interactions with him was on a staircase. I had been, when I joined the organization, I wanted to, and this goes back to when I was an intern and joined the organization, I should say, I wanted to learn everything I could about the business, everything I could about the team. So I walked around and, I went in the ticket office and I offered to help, alphabetize will call envelopes or stuff ticket envelopes. I went to the scouting department and offered to help organize things for the combine or otherwise. Well, at one point, a couple people in the organization said to me, you shouldn't do that. Al's not going to like that. And I said, Al's not going to like what? They said, Al's not going to like that you're walking around and like sticking your nose into other departments. Just, they didn't use the expression stay in your lane, but it was the equivalent of stay in your lane. Well, one day I was walking up the main staircase and he was coming down that staircase and we stopped right at the same point on the same stair. And he looked at me and said, "Where are we on ticket sales for this week?" And it was at that moment that I knew he was well aware I was walking around the organization and asking questions. And I interpreted that to be his way of not only letting me know he wasn't troubled by that, but encouraging me to continue to learn. And I also learned at that moment, know the answer. If you're going to walk around and learn, you better learn. The other very, very early encounter that I had with him disproves something many believe about him. It is believed by many that Al wouldn't tolerate those who disagreed with him or tolerate disagreement of any sort. And if that were the case, I'd have been fired about 2.5 weeks into my job because we had a blow up disagreement and we went on to work together for almost 30 years, during which period we disagreed more than we agreed.
That's true. And I mean, I've heard you talk about this in other interviews as well, but, when you have interactions like that, when people say, "Oh, this is who Al is," and you say, "Well, this is who I am." One of the things that I love that you mentioned several times is how your mother always said, "To thine own self be true to yourself." And there's a balance, right, of what everyone else thinks, "Oh, we got to stay in our lane, we got to do this," versus, "Hey, this is who I am as a person, and this is what I'm doing to succeed and to add to this organization," whether it's feeling confident enough to walk around the building or feeling confident enough to stand up to Al Davis. How do you balance that line?
Well, you stated that beautifully, of course. And I love that you referenced the advice my mother gave me. It to this day remains the best advice I've ever received in my whole life, which is, as you said, to thine own self be true. And my mom said that to me from the time I was a very little girl. As moms can do, she repeated it over and over and over again. And as little girls can do, I rolled my eyes every time she did, but it really was the best advice I've ever received. My biggest mistakes, my biggest bumbles and stumbles have been when I have tried to be someone or be something I am not. So, by the way, it wasn't until I was at Cal Berkeley that I learned that that was a Shakespearean quote, and that my mom, I didn't know my mom was quoting Shakespeare. I thought she made it up. Right. But whether Shakespeare or my mom, it's tremendous advice. And when I'm asked for advice by people, that's the first piece of advice I give, which is be true to yourself. Because first of all, again, I know my biggest mistakes have been when I haven't been true to myself. But the other thing is, if you're going to make a mistake, and we all make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes, but if you're going to make a mistake, don't you want to make it your way? I mean, if I'm going to make a mistake, I want to make a mistake in the way that I believe was best, even if it ends up being a mistake. And that's poorly stated. But the fact is, I don't want to try to be someone or something I'm not and then make a mistake anyway, because then it's not even my mistake.
Right. Absolutely. If you make a mistake imitating what you think it should be, you'll kick yourself like, I should have just been myself. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, you said that far more succinctly and far better than I did.
I got you. I feel like I'm on the same page, and this makes so much sense. And, when you are being yourself, there are some moments that's harder to do than others. And, a lot of people give a lot of credit to Al Davis for being such a groundbreaker and naming you the CEO, the very first woman to hold that position in an NFL space, but not just in the Raiders. This emanates, or this ripples league wide, right? When you're going to these league meetings, these owners meetings, when you've got, other executives whispering the Princess of Darkness in a not flattering way, as we talked about. What was that initially like? And how do you kind of hold your own in those spaces where this is new to the rest of the people that are there?
Well, a few responses to that. And first and foremost, you're absolutely right. Al wasn't concerned with race, gender, ethnicity, or any other individuality, which has no bearing whatsoever on whether one can do a job, and whether someone is a Raider fan or a Raider hater, whether someone loved Al Davis or couldn't stand him. If we're intellectually honest, we'll recognize that he did that decades and decades before it was a topic on the table, so to speak. And I think he deserves tremendous credit for that. I certainly owe my career to him. As to the part of your question about how did I operate or handle myself or react when I was in those rooms, two issues, and they're not mutually exclusive. When I went to my first league meeting, I was the only woman in the room, I should say. I was the only woman in the room for a period of time. And yet at that first league meeting, notwithstanding that the Raiders and the league were embroiled in a business dispute, some of the just tremendous men involved with the league were very supportive and encouraging. Wellington Mara, Lamar Hunt, Ralph Wilson, Dan Rooney. Those are four names that come to mind. Those men were the stalwarts of the league. And as I said, they were involved in a business dispute, a major business dispute, which pitted them against Al. But notwithstanding that, and I note that dispute because they could have had any reason to not welcome me that would have had nothing to do with my gender. They could have just not welcomed me because I was on the other side of the dispute. But the fact is, those four men went out of their way to lend me their support and to encourage me. And, I will forever thank Wellington and Lamar and Dan and Ralph for doing that. As to how I proceeded in that room, I didn't think about my gender. I didn't think about my gender when I was in that meeting room or in a meeting with players or bankers or municipal leaders or coaches. It doesn't make sense to me. It never has, that one should go into a meeting, into a situation of any sort, with the hope and the expectation that no one is thinking about their gender if they're thinking about their gender. If I don't want you thinking about my gender, why am I thinking about it? And by the way, if you want to waste your time thinking about it, go ahead, waste your time. I'm just going to focus on doing the job.
Right. That's a great way to see it. That is a great way to see it. And like you said, you know what? You're capable, you're in the room for a reason, and you got to lean into that. And I think so often as women in a space that has for a long time been predominantly men, but is definitely becoming so much more welcoming to women. It's like, okay, yeah, women can be here too. And there are plenty of examples of that. And I love your point of like, hey, if you don't think about it, nobody else will.
Well,
Um,
and and two things in that regard. There are a lot of terrific women in the league, and that started, long ago. I mean, after I joined the league, some of the names that come to mind: Jeannie Bonk with the I was going to say San Diego. I should put a quarter in the jar, right? With the Los Angeles Chargers, Hannah Gordon with the San Francisco 49ers. There are Sandra with the Las Vegas Raiders now. Sandra Douglas Morgan. There are terrific women in the league, and I was asked. I have been asked many times, was I tested because I was a woman? I don't know. But let's assume I was. I think it's very fair to assume I was. People are tested all the time. We're tested because of our race, our gender, our ethnicity, our age, our seniority, our educational background. Well, what's the best thing to do when we're tested? Pass the damn test. So that's where I put my energy.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of being tested, though, too, one of the things that comes to mind is, reactions. Some people will say, some sports fans will say, well, you never played the game of football. How could you know this game so well? And I will be quick to point out, well, there are plenty of men who are covering it and have never played it either. But when you hear that, what is your response?
Well, don't people know I played defensive end? Are they not familiar with my sack record? No, your point is it's well taken. That's something that's heard quite a bit. And to state the obvious, you don't need to have played the game to understand the game. Now, I had the tremendous fortune of learning the game, sitting with men like Al Davis and Bill Walsh and listening to them discuss X's and O's. And there was never a time when they were discussing X and O's that when I interjected with a question, which I did a lot, they would stop, they would take time, they would go to the whiteboard or have me go to the whiteboard. They would explain things. I got to sit with men like Ted Hendricks and Gene Upshaw, and I could, name after name after name of these magnificent Hall of Fame players who, anytime I wanted to learn more about the game, had conversations with me. So, I will say to anyone who says, Aim, you didn't play, how can you understand the game? You know what? Get back to me after you talk with all those Hall of Fame players and coaches, and then we'll have a little chat.
And that is how it's done, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up? I'm John Wall.
And I'm CJ Toledano, and we're starting a new podcast presented by DraftKings called Point Game.
Okay, like at camps and stuff like this, you take the ball out, you ain't getting the ball back. Like, you the last one up the court, they already did their thing, so I stopped that and I just got into a rhythm and started hooping.
If King of the Court happened next season, who do you think would win?
I just think KD, bro. Like, it's nothing you can do with him.
Yeah. The Lakers should sign Trae Young this summer.
And I think they got to kind of start preparing for, like, if LeBron's last year, this year, next year, whenever it is. And I feel like a pick and roll with AD and a guy like Trae Young would be deadly.
It's like a Fresh Prince, in the theme where he hops from Philly in a cab and shows up in LA. And I was like, man, John Wall actually did that and made a name for himself.
If I did that, I need all my money back. That cab ride was long as hell.
Check out Point Game with John Wall and CJ Toledano on the iHeartRadio app, DraftKings YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Y'all need to give me my own space, but I'm about to have this shit.
One of the things that stands out too is the Raiders as an organization are, pretty big on keeping in touch with past players. I know you have developed some significant relationships with a lot of the players, coaches, people that you've worked with throughout the years with the Raiders. Is there a moment of that career, whether it be a game, a moment of the season, or a person or a special relationship that you developed that really stands out in your time there?
My relationships with so many players and so many coaches stands out. I was in the league for almost 30 years, and I can't even begin to count the number of those moments that I will forever, ever cherish. But the first moment was one with Gene Upshaw. I had not been with the team very long at all, and I was out on our practice field with some of our business guests and waiting for practice to end. And towards the end of practice, it was opened up to the media, and the media came on the sideline at practice. And one of them yelled out to Gene Upshaw, in a voice clearly, obviously intended for everyone to hear, "Hey, Gene, what's it like having a girl work for the team?" And in his booming, booming voice, Gene replied, "She's not a girl, she's a Raider." And I get goosebumps to this moment. I am covered in goosebumps now when I think about that. When you are, pretty brand new to an organization and Gene Upshaw comes to your aid like that, has your back like that, that is a moment that has been meaningful to me since it happened, and it forever will be.
And such a testament too to the way that you impacted these players and these people that you worked with as well.
And if you're ever going into a street fight, you want Gene Upshaw and Ted Hendricks and those Willie Brown and Jack Tatum. That's who you want with you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You're like, oh, you want to mess with me? You got to answer to them.
Exactly.
Now you've seen the Raiders in Los Angeles, in Oakland, now in Las Vegas. Obviously a team really relates to the community it's a part of, but as this organization has evolved with the varying communities, but still kind of kept its core, what would you say defines what makes being a Raider wherever this team is?
That's a great question. I think it all goes back to Al, and that this is an organization that really led the way in so many regards when it comes to diversity and inclusiveness. And I'll point again to the fact, and I'll do this in chronological order, certainly not in order of importance, or I'd put myself last, but chronologically, he hired Tom Flores, he hired me, he hired Art Shell. This was decades and decades before others were even thinking about this. He led the way. And one of the things that I will, that will always stand out to me is there were times I said to him, "You don't receive enough credit for having done what you did." And his response to me was, "Hey, I don't want any credit." And he was sincere. And the discussions we had and the point he made is nobody should get credit for doing the right thing. So I think that stands out about the organization. One thing that stood out to me throughout my career and still does are the tremendous fans of that organization. I will forever, ever have their back and love them and cherish them. They embraced me from the moment my career started. I embraced them back, and we still embrace. So I think that resonates. And then I love, the whole behavior problem, of course, resonated with me. And really, who among us doesn't know someone who was labeled a behavior problem or who themselves wasn't labeled a behavior problem? I sure was. And I love that Al didn't care.
Hey, there's a lid for every jar, right?
Wonderfully stated.
I kind of love it. I love it. Amy Trask, I could talk to you for hours about this, but we got to wrap it up. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, thank you for having me. It really is an honor and a pleasure to join you. I'm a big fan of your work and delighted to have this conversation.
Such a pleasure. And for those listening, you can watch Amy on CBS Sports Network. Check out her book, You Negotiate Like a Girl. The Princess of Darkness has graced us with her presence. It has been such a treat. Amy Trask, have a great one.
Thank you. You too.
This is where projects come to life. Our showrooms are designed to inspire with the latest products from top brands, curated in an inviting, hands-on environment, and a team of industry experts to support your project. We'll be there to make sure everything goes as planned, from product selection to delivery coordination. At Ferguson Bath, Kitchen, and Lighting Gallery, your project is our priority.
Find great brands like Kohler at your local showroom or visit us online at ferguson.com/build.
You deserve to treat yourself, so turn your tax refund into a U fund and give yourself a Straight Talk Wireless Extended Silver Unlimited plan and get a new Samsung Galaxy A14 on them. You can get a great everyday value on wireless with Straight Talk's Unlimited plan starting at $25 a line per month for 4 lines. You'll save so much you'll be enjoying that refund all year long. It's the refund that keeps on refunding. Find Straight Talk at straighttalk.com or at your local Walmart store.
Taxes and fees not included. Offer valid through 4/14/24 while supplies last. Online only. Must purchase a Straight Talk Extended Silver Unlimited plan to qualify. Limit of 5 phones per customer. Family plan discount with 4 lines, all on the Silver Unlimited plan. Not combinable with autopay discount.